of your disclosure?
Why are you asking me? Because I'm never the one struggling to find it.
I'd like to call this meeting of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board to order. Someone certify closed session, please.
Madam Chair, I certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as stated in Virginia law, and that only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Mrs. Taylor.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Ownby.
Aye. Item 3.0, we have a public hearing on the FY 2019-20 operating budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this point in our meeting where citizens are invited to address the board, those citizens desiring to speak should have submitted speaker cards to the clerk prior to the start of the closed session, tonight's meeting. These speakers are asked to come to the podium when their names are called, state their names for the record, and direct their comments to the chair of the board. It is the board's interest and desire that all comments are heard and respected, and citizens are asked not to engage in applauding, verbal outbursts, or any other type of demonstrations during the presentations. Personnel matters are not considered in public meetings, therefore, the board requests that all speakers refrain from making reference to specific individuals in any form or fashion. Though the board does not respond to your comments during the meeting, your comments are being heard and appreciated. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to make their presentation, and the board asks that you respect this time limitation. Also, please be reminded that no time may be yielded to another speaker. Your acceptance and adherence to these guidelines will be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Madam Chair. My instructions are concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Hummel?
Hi, can Vanita Singh please come up to the podium?
Good evening. My name is Vanita Singh, and I am here as a representative of the Village WJCC. The Village Initiative, as I'm sure you're all aware, is an action-oriented grassroots organization committed to working together with the Williamsburg-James City County School District to achieve greater equity and diversity in our school system. We're pleased to note that the board has prioritized competitive compensation to attract and retain employees in this year's budget and is planning a 4% salary increase for teachers and staff. Yet we are also concerned that this plan does not take into account the specific problem of recruiting and retaining teachers and counselors of color. We'd like to remind the board of the well-documented correlations between the presence of teachers of color in the classroom and increases in test performance and graduation rates for students of color, as well as decreases in the suspensions and expulsion rates for the same students. We encourage the board to seriously consider expanding opportunities for teachers of color across the school district. For instance, through stipends for experienced teachers of color willing to mentor new teachers, joint planning time for new teachers and mentors, as well as release time to observe other teachers, development of new curricula and/or school events that enhance diversity and equity, and finally, building strong relationships with historically Black colleges and universities in the area, such as Hampton and Norfolk State, to recruit teachers of color. I think this is all part of a report that we'll be presenting to the board. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Amy Clark.
Good evening. My name is Amy Quirk. I'm a parent and also a member of the Village Initiative. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the superintendent's proposed budget tonight. The Village Initiative is pleased to see additional resources put towards achieving equity in the proposed budget. However, we are concerned that some of these commitments don't go far enough. And there's 4 issues I'd like to speak to tonight. First, we're very pleased to see 2 additional EL teachers in the budget. But we are concerned that 2 teachers may not be enough given the kind of demographic change that we're seeing. As Dr. Beers and Mr. Kelly suggested at the January 22nd meeting, this would put our EL student-teacher ratio at 1 to 43, which still leaves us lagging behind most of the other 8 school districts in our region, and we would like to be a leader on addressing these students' needs. Secondly, we're pleased to see the addition of 5 school counselors, particularly given that this was an issue that the teachers raised in their survey. We're concerned again that 5 new counselors may not be enough. This just puts us at the minimum of the standards of quality requirements by the state. And again, given the significant issues our students are facing, we can be leaders in this area. We are especially concerned that our ELL students do not have access to trained bilingual counselors. Third, we are pleased to see 4 middle school assistant principals in the budget and that they can play a leadership role in developing long-term community-based approach to safety in our schools, particularly by building relationships with students and families. We are concerned, however, with the addition of 4 security officers at the middle schools, and these will not necessarily improve the safety of our most vulnerable students, and it raises concerns about added policing of students of color. Our district already has worrying racial trends in its approach to discipline. In 2017-2018, students identifying as Black, Hispanic, or of 2 or more races accounted for 68% of short-term and 79% of long-term suspensions, even though they only make up 38% of the student population in the district as a whole. We would urge the school board to reject proposals that potentially deepen the school-to-prison pipeline and redirect these funds towards hiring and supporting more teachers and counselors, particularly those of color, that can build safe schools. Finally, we wanted to reiterate what Ms. Cook and Ms. Young had noted in an earlier school board meeting, that there has been little attention in this proposed budget to the opportunity gaps by race and socioeconomic status. One of the ways in which we see these gaps is that students with greater need are concentrated within some schools, Lafayette versus Jamestown, for example. Funding across schools should be allocated based on student need, not simply on student numbers. And we don't see this kind of needs-based funding reflected that strongly in the proposed budget as it stands. Thank you.
Claire Brantley?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Claire Brantley. I'm a school counselor at Stonehouse Elementary School, and I'm joined by my awesome colleagues, school counselors across the division. And I also asked 2 parents to attend, both of whom made every effort to come, but hopefully they will be contacting you as well. We want to thank you just sincerely from the bottom of our hearts for prioritizing adding additional funding for school counselors in the 2025 school year budget, the 5.0 full-time school counselors. We just want to thank you so much. I honestly never imagined this happening. The priority that's been given to funding school counselors is just so critical to our school safety, even the academic success. We're here to support the holistic development of all students. We're not there to sit around and just work with 1 or 2. We're trained to help the whole student and the whole student body. So ASCA, the American School Counselor Association, recommends that we serve 250 students per counselor, and all of our training programs in the state are really equipping counselors to do a job with that as the understanding. With ratios double that, like myself at Stonehouse, it's difficult to be able to provide all the services that we're trained and equipped to provide our students. For example, there is other legislation on the docket for requiring that we serve students 80% directly, and I can attest that I do that. I document my time, and I do meet that required standard of 80% direct services to my students at Stonehouse, and I'm still unable to meet the recommended response time for the influx of students requesting services. So even though my use of time has been tracked as effective and maximized, I still can't serve all the student needs. For example, we do a need assessment for small group counseling, and at times teachers will give us 100 names. There's only 1.5 school counselors at Stonehouse, and we can, at the most, without compromising quality, serve about 25 in groups. So that's 75 students that we then try to figure out, how do we help these individuals that can't fit in our groups? If we try to service them one-on-one, that's even more time. So please, we just ask that the 5 additional school counselors remain on the docket, if not be increased. We don't want to see that leave the final proposed budget, and we appreciate all of your consideration and your time spent on this. Thank you.
That is our final speaker for the budget. So that closes our budget hearing, and we're moving on to the work session. Ms. Surza, will you please take the roll?
Dr. Beers.
Here.
Ms. Cook.
Here.
Ms. Hummel.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mrs. Taylor.
Here.
Mrs. Young.
Here.
Ms. Ownby.
Here. Approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Mrs. Taylor.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Ownby.
Aye. Item 5.1, announcements, superintendent's report. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our report this evening focuses on kindness and the acts big and small that are happening in our community as part of the Williamsburg Kind initiative. I first told you about this project a few weeks ago and promised to share example of kindness in our schools at future meetings. Tonight we'll look at the deeds of our students and staff at Clara Bird Baker Elementary School. Up on the screen you will see a few photographs as I take you through this. For example, Mrs. Antol's third grade students wrote special cards for the fire department to thank them for their service to our community. Miss Woodruff's class made blankets for the cats and kittens at a local animal shelter to help them keep warm until they find their forever homes. Mr. May's fifth graders delivered positive messages and treats to our law enforcement partners last month. Meanwhile, for Kindness Week, fifth graders in Miss Chalwowski's class made cards for residents of a local nursing home. And that same week, first graders in Mr. Nick's room wrote thank you letters to the school cafeteria staff for making them delicious and nutritious lunches. As you can see, gratitude, caring and kindness are ingrained in the culture at Clara Bird Baker Elementary School. The same is true at all of our schools across the division. Board members, parents and community members can help share photographs and stories of kindness by posting them on social media using the hashtag WMBGKind. Madam Chair, that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Do board members have announcements? So now we're moving into citizens' comments. Item 6.1, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I've said this before. It is at this point in our meeting where citizens are invited to address the board. Those citizens desiring to speak should have submitted speaker cards to the clerk prior to the start of tonight's meeting. These speakers are asked to come to the podium when their names are called, state their names for the record, and direct their comments to the chair of the board. It is the board's interest and desire that all comments are heard and respected. Hence, citizens are asked to not engage in applauding, verbal outbursts, or any other type of demonstrations during the presentations. Personnel matters are not considered in public meetings, therefore the board requests that all speakers refrain from making reference to specific individuals in any form or fashion. Though the board does not respond to your comments during the meeting, your comments are being heard and appreciated. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to make their presentation. The board asks that you respect this time limitation. Also, please be reminded that no time may be yielded to another speaker. Your acceptance and adherence to these guidelines will be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Madam Chair. My instructions are concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Hummel.
Susan Hildrum?
Members of the school board and the
School Administration. I'm Susan Hildum, and as chair of the NAACP Education Committee, I would like to sincerely thank you for voting to elevate teachers' pay. Our committee hopes, and I'm sure you do, that this will help to retain new teachers in the school district. We have particular hopes that this will help to retain teachers of color who are so important to the diversity of the school district staff. In addition, we hope for new and innovative strategies to attract teachers of color and the development of a strong support system to retain all teachers who are new to the school system. Our Education Committee supports efforts to reduce class size in order to improve the educational experiences for all students. We advocate for including grant writers in the district staff to bring in financial support for enrichment and specialized programs. We encourage particular support for special education instruction as well. We support the role of a volunteer coordinator to bring the maximum support from the community for all the classrooms as needed and requested from teachers. And lastly, our committee appreciates hearing any updates on improvements occurring at James Blair Middle School. So to the board members and the district staff, we want to say thank you for your work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Finally, Ken Lewis.
Hi, my name is Ken Lewis. I'm trying to find out how we can get 8th graders to participate in junior varsity high school sports as allowed by the Virginia High School Handbook and Policy, which apparently James City County does participate with but doesn't follow 100%. I am told by the high school athletic directors that there's a rule that says you can't have 8th graders, but yet the handbook says there are rules that do allow it, and the school districts around us do allow it also. So that's what I'm trying to find out, if we can just get a ruling on that. And I have all the documents of regulations if anybody cares to see it.
Share that with the board clerk, and she will share that with the rest of the board. Thank you. Moving on to item 7.0, proposed agenda items. 7.1, WJCC Schools Foundation for Innovative Learning Grants.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to invite Mr. Wilson to the podium this evening, who's president of the WJCC Schools Foundation. Every year, the Schools Foundation presents grants to teachers for innovative work in the classrooms, and we're incredibly appreciative of the support of the Foundation, and I know our teachers look forward to receiving grants. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. Chairperson, Ms. Owensby, and members of the board. My name is Clarence Wilson, president of the WJCC Schools Foundation Board of Directors. The Foundation's mission is to partner with the community to provide resources for the Williamsburg-James City County Schools in the form of grants to support innovation in our classroom. The Foundation is pleased to announce a donation of $34,575.77 to the school division to fund 24 innovative learning grants for 32 division staff members spread over 13 schools. Grants will be awarded to recipients on Tuesday, March 26. The Foundation awarded its first series of grants in January of 2016, and including grants announced tonight, over the last 4 years we have awarded $150,125 to fund 107 grants in support of innovation in our classrooms. 170 teachers have received grants, and over 85% of students in the school division have benefited from the grants. Grant Awards Day has become a day of celebration at the schools, and the response from division staff has been overwhelmingly positive. Those who have been on the school buses on Awards Day have witnessed the joy of teachers and students and heard some of the most truly creative ideas and grants that are supporting, that we are supporting. In past presentations, I have asked you to imagine the time when students are enjoying the benefits of dozens of innovative ideas working in their classroom through multiple grants. We no longer need to imagine. We can now see how 3D printers are allowing students to create three-dimensional designs and models in support of deeper understanding of a broad range of topics. How probeware allows for more in-depth study of scientific interactions, and how virtual reality viewers are allowing students to experience content in radical new ways. And these are just a few examples of how teachers are using grants to explore different ways to inspire learning over many subject areas. We also understand that learning from projects are not confined to one classroom for 1 year. They are often spread across many classrooms and become the new way of teaching a concept. So it is truly true in this case, a little money goes a long way. We are pleased to report that the community continues to support the idea of providing support for innovation in the classrooms. Over our 4-year history, nearly 300 individuals, business, and foundation donors have supported our fundraising efforts. And we are proud that almost 30% of funds raised have been contributed by the foundation's board, in addition to their 1,000 hours of volunteerism. Our best spokesperson continue to be grant winners, our teachers. Donors have been so impressed by their ideas and strong commitment to student learning. Our board continues to focus on building capacity and sustainability in critical areas. The first being the diversity of skills on our board and committees. Because of the hands-on nature of our board and day-to-day operations, we depend on members to have working skills in key areas such as development, marketing, and finance. It is critical that we continue attracting board members with a broad diversity of skills and approaches to problem solving who don't mind the hands-on approach that is required for the foundation's success. We are pleased to have Mrs. Humble and Dr. Heron as involved members of our board. The second area is community awareness. In other words, getting the word out. When community members hear about our work, they're always supportive, and then they ask, why haven't we heard about you before? Our goal is to increase community awareness through many vehicles, but this is an area where everyone can be effective, and we will appreciate any support that we can get. Our 2018 annual report will be mailed soon, and its theme is Making a Difference, which focuses on telling our 4-year story. So in closing, we believe the foundation is fulfilling its mission of uniting the community to provide resources for schools, and greatly appreciate the school board's support for that work. On behalf of the foundation's board of directors, I thank the school board and the school division for your support and cooperation in helping the foundation achieve its goals. We look forward to you joining us on the 26th as we celebrate the awarding of another series of grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And we do thank you for all of your work and all the foundation's work, because it makes a huge impact in the lives of many of our students and teachers. Stay here. Mr. Wilson. Additional comments? Yes, from Ms. Cook.
Did you want to go to her first?
Well, I must say that it has been a pleasure serving on this board with such a dedicated group of community volunteers. They come from all, like you said, you've got development experts, you've got education experts, you've got marketing specialists. They just come from all over with one mission in mind, and that's to bring innovation to our school system. So thank you, Mr. Wilson, for your leadership, because it's hard to replace you as a leader, as you know. I know you're trying, but anyway, thank you for your leadership, and it'll be a pleasure to participate in March one more time and see what you guys, because we as board members, we don't know what the.
Really, I don't either.
You don't either, right? I mean, it is really a surprise to all of us.
one or two
Yes,
people
so-
who know.
I know. So anyway, in a future life, maybe I'll get to serve on the grant committee. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Cook.
Mr. Wilson, thank you very much. This is really, truly a working board, and seeing that in action, I just really appreciate the time and energy that you and your colleagues put into this effort. And I think after 4 years, what I love about it most is that it truly democratizes innovation at the grassroots level in this division. And the money is nimble and it's immediate. And what I've seen or observed over the last couple years is that once something new is tried in a building, I've seen the entire culture of the building change in response to that. So I've seen principals reorganize their budgets a little bit. If you've purchased flexible seating, for instance, then that all of a sudden spreads. So your funds are multiplying. And so I just think you're doing wonderful work and can't thank you enough. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Having come through the entire evolution of this, from this is a great idea to watching it, I think you've surpassed what we thought we could do. And I just want to thank you for you and the foundation board members and the rest for all that you do. I mean, there's two real critical things here. Is one, it allows a conduit for the community to participate in our schools. And I think that's extraordinary. And go on the buses with some of the donors from the grants, and they get to see the excitement in the school. They get to see the excitement in their teachers. And as we consider a budget that's almost $140 million, we're really passing out not really big amounts of money, but the amount of excitement it generates, I think, is just extraordinary amongst our teachers and gives them, an avenue to really go there. So I just I can't thank you enough as and the rest of the foundation for what you've done to really generate that excitement and to get WJCC schools out in the community. And, as a standard bearer for the parade, it was really kind of fun, too. So, so thank you, Clarence.
Additional comments from board?
Yeah, I can't really add too much to that, except I thank you. Service. He said, saw this, and it really has, it does help.
Ms. Young.
Just thank you. I don't have much to say after all of those wonderful comments, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
The next item, 7.2. Revisions to the school board standard operating procedure. I'm going to toss that.
Okay, so this has been around the block a few times, and so what we have done below is actually listed, itemized every single tweak to the SOP, and if anyone has any questions or wants to talk about it, we are willing to discuss.
Ms. Taylor.
Yes, I had a couple of just mechanic issues with a couple of things. Of course, everyone who knows me and knows when I was on policy committee, I'm always having those comments. I think on page 8, there should be a comma between vision and mission.
What is it called, an Oxford comma? No, is this what we need, an Oxford comma? Let's bring it up, sorry.
Sarah's writing this down.
Yeah, sure.
Ms. Taylor, where on page 8 exactly?
Oh, right
Bullet.
there, yeah, oh, so it's in board docs,
Oh.
but not on, okay, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so
Third
page
bullet
8.
from the bottom, yeah.
I'm going to it,
After vision. After vision. Yes.
Correct. Okay, and the other one? On page 18, this is just my personal preference. I don't think we need the word "on." I think the statement would read correctly if we simply stated, "After consultation with board members, the chair and superintendent will make a determination if and when to add the proposed agenda items to the agenda."
Agree.
Yeah. Those are your comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly.
I thought she was going to get to mine, but on page 10, I think where it says James City County, I think the language is a little quirky there. Representatives two of the school board?
Oh. Where is it?
Board membership, James City County. On page 10,
I know, but like,
Hold on.
under James, okay.
representatives two of the,
Oh, no, yeah.
But we can't, is that, Ms. Souza, is that?
two of?
Two of.
Can't
You
change
just-
two of?
Just delete the two.
Yeah.
Is that in the policy?
The two of?
No, I think the 2 is a typo.
Okay, sorry.
We didn't screw that up in the
Just wanna make
policy.
Good catch.
Right here.
And then there was one on the public comment. Not sure that it was clear. I don't know if I'm getting it, I'm finding it, I'm not there yet. Where they talk about, I should have written this down.
Practices, is it on page 16?
It could be. It just seemed the language we had for 30 minutes and 3 minutes was,
29? 30 minutes and 3 minutes is on page 29.
okay.
29?
This might also be just a little bit more personal preference, but
You're talking about public participation at board meetings, right?
right.
Yeah, that's page 29.
Which paragraph?
So in the third paragraph, 30 minutes will be allocated for citizen comments. Speakers will be requested to limit their presentation to a maximum of 3 minutes. Okay, the language is in there. I'm,
Okay with it.
yeah, just ignore what I've said for the last 5 minutes. Just go to James. Just do the two of.
Standard operating procedure. Ignore what you just said.
And are there
I'm
additional
good.
comments? You're good? Any additional comments, Dr. Beers? Okay. And this
Thank
will-
you all for your input.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you to the policy committee for working on that. So,
It was fun.
Indeed.
migrate over. Okay, the next action item, or proposed agenda item is 7.3, award a contract to resurface the athletic track at Ward Hill High School.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Snipes is going to present several items this evening that are either end-of-year spending or this year's capital improvement plan approved. Mr. Snipes.
Good evening, Madam Chair, school board members, Dr. Herron. Tonight's proposed agenda item was approved in the FY18 CIP for the, it was approved in the year-end spending plan for $509,250. The project is to replace the track at Ward Hill High School. Recent weather and the weather last year damaged the track so much so that they cannot hold competition there, and we are concerned of it being a safety issue. So with the money being approved in the year-end spending plan, of course, this project is expected to be completed before June 30th of this year. We've talked with the AD, we've talked with Dr. Carroll in how we're going to assist the track team in helping them have practice at other locations, so they are aware of that. The track, we will remove the existing track surface. We will repair the subsurface. We're going to replace the drainage system because that is the cause of the track where it's just not draining properly. They're going to relocate a portion of the chain link fence that goes around the track, move it back a little bit to create a little more safety, and they are going to, of course, repair and resurface the entire track. So hopefully we will have a bid for you at your next agenda item at your.
Questions for Snipes?
I just looked at him because I knew you would.
It's nice to be predictable. So you're issuing a contract on March 19th, and it's going to be complete by the end of June?
Correct, because we are currently using a contractor who is purchasing under a annual agreement with the county.
Okay. It just seems like it's a pretty quick period of performance to, having lived through a Jamestown issue.
Yes, we are working diligently. We've been working since January, preparing, making sure we have a schedule of work, making sure we're a contractor, so we're just, as soon as the approval goes through.
So we had one contractor, had to give it to him, another one had to come in.
Yeah, that was because we put that out to bid originally, and that contractor we are digressing, he is referring to Jamestown High School track. That contractor could not finish the job, so we had to go out and get another. Don't presume this will happen with this contractor.
Okay.
Additional questions for Mr. Snipes about the track? I had a couple questions. So what is the typical life of a high school track?
Depending on weather, because it's outside, there's no, give you an example, Jamestown was built in 1997 and we replaced it in 2016. So that's almost 20 years. Fort Hill was built in 2007, but
This is the first time we'll be replacing War Hill's track. There are no additional questions? I think Mr. Snipes is going to stay here.
Yes.
For a while. Okay, so moving on to the next item, award a contract for invitation of bid, number 19-13721, window replacement at Norwich Elementary School.
Yes, if you recall, during our CIP project update in July, we informed you that 6 of the 21 windows at Norwich were replaced. The facility condition index gave us a cost that they thought we would be able to replace all. However, after the contractor got in, they found much more damage than what the facility condition index thought would be there. So these funds are to, this budget of $160,000 is to replace the remaining number of windows. Out of the initial funds that were approved, we have about $30,000 left, and any balance transfers will be done from completed CIP projects. Again, this is to remove existing windows and molding, to repair the damaged drywall and casework, and to install new storefront windows. An IFB was sent out on January 8th, returned to January 22nd, but we are unable to provide that information at this time until the process has been completed. Awarded, provided to you at your next meeting.
Ms. Cook and then Ms. Young.
And we're confident that we have enough funds in the fund balance to cover whatever the.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Young?
What kind of damage are you talking about? I mean, if they go in and they remove the window, they look at the structure around
Correct.
the
They
window,
look at the window
and then
frame, they look at the, like you said, the case working and the existing windows and the molding, everything. They look at it all. And if they need to, they will reinforce.
So what kind of casing is around those windows that they would become ruined? Is it wood?
I could not tell. I can give you that.
I would like to know, because, I mean, there's all kinds of techniques to protect that if that's the case. And but I'm not a window expert, but I have had to replace windows, so I know if that structure is not protected, then they rot again. But yes, if you could just let me know, I'd appreciate that.
Any additional?
Virginia.
Welcome to Williamsburg.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, on following Mrs. Young's comment, we also have had windows replaced in our homes, and a lot of it is just the huge amount of humidity in
Yes.
Virginia. And so when we're doing a massive replacement of windows, are we looking at the kind of material that will be like resistant to the humidity?
I can ask the contractor. We bid this out in construction administration to an architect who then does this work for us. Similar as when we build a school, they bid out the most qualifying product and company.
Because that, to me, sometimes the cheapest isn't the way to go. If you have to keep replacing it. So, I mean, it's worth it maybe to look into it. And I don't know how the bidding process works. I don't know
We'll find out.
how you make decisions on things like that, but just wanted to throw it out there.
Questions on that? And I'm moving on to 7.5, award a contract for invitation for bid number 19, -13722, electrical equipment replacement at Lafayette High School.
Yes, this was a facility condition index recommendation as well. It was in the it was approved in the FY19 CIP. This is actually two projects, and the budget for those two projects combined is $300,305. The scope of the work includes replacing 17 electrical panels that were original to the facility, as well as two amp switchboards, one 1600 and one 4000 amp switchboard. This IFB was issued on January 7th and returned on January 28th. And provide it to you at your next.
Other questions about that? Dr. Beers?
Yeah, I just have a question. Mr. Sipes, my assumption is that our facilities manager knows about these kinds of pitfalls and in turn those. Also assuming that come in, that he'll raise the kinds of questions that we're raising right now. So
The facility.
confident, yeah.
Correct. Mr. Falzone will raise those questions, but also the architect who's involved with helping us design those raises those questions in regards to
Not
the
that I'm not
quality of the
knowledgeable
window.
about replacing windows, but I think they have a level of expertise that goes beyond.
They do, but the questions raised, we will definitely bring those up. However, it usually goes to the most responsive bidder, which means the lowest, and then there's questions that go into what kind, but the contract is put out with the type of windows which are expected.
The period of performance for this will be over the summer?
Yes, we're expecting this to be ready before the beginning of the new school year.
I'm sounding very engineerish tonight, I think, but if they go into these and are replacing panels and switchboards, what if they find out there's faulty wiring? I mean, because that could happen. I'm just concerned about that. I mean, this is a high-cost item.
Yes, it could, and there's always contingency built into the budget.
Okay. It's just knob and tube, right? It's not any of that kind of stuff we're talking about.
No, it's not.
Okay, good.
I think all of these items are part of, we had that very comprehensive facilities index
Right.
completed several years ago, and there was a lot of research and oversight of all of our buildings, and these are all a result of some of the findings from that.
I mean, I guess that brings up a question. When we did that study, I mean, do they go up into the structure of the building and check all of this stuff out?
Yes.
Okay, that's basically what I needed to know.
Additional questions?
I have another one. When you said the original, do you mean like
1973.
1970?
Three.
Oh, dear.
It's time.
Time.
Okay.
Lasted a long time.
It lasted a long time. Yes. Okay.
Got our money out of it.
It's time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Snipes. Item 7.6, middle school student technology refresh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ladders is going to present two items this evening in connection with the normal technology refresh and a new firewall.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Herron. This evening, we're asking for your consideration for the approval of purchasing student-use laptops for our middle schools. This purchase is part of the planned technology refresh of the middle school student-use laptops, and the cost for this purchase is included in the school board's approved fiscal year 19 budget. The cost for this refresh of 850 laptops is $462,451 and includes the expanded warranty, the accidental damage protection, as well as annual refurbishment for the life of the devices. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Young.
I have a question. Can this be held off a year?
Well, the danger there is that the devices that are currently being used by the students already have 4 years of use on them. They would be off of warranty, so any subjected damage at that point would be additional cost to the division for those repairs.
Okay.
Just as a point of reference, Ms. Young, 2 years ago, we went to a 4-year refresh cycle rather than a 3 to try to extend and, spread the money out over a period of time.
I understand. My son refuses to do anything with my computer. That's that old, so I understand.
Dr. Beers?
I just have it's curious about it. But I know there's a whole industry that takes old laptops, refurbishes them and sells them. What do we do with do we sell those to somebody?
We do. We have entered into an agreement with a vendor that buys our old devices, so we do receive some money coming back from our old out-of-date devices.
Ms. Cook?
Yeah, so this isn't necessarily a question to be answered tonight, but a request, if the chair and superintendent think it appropriate. This is for the one-to-one effort, and that did not extend this year into ninth grade, which would have been its natural kind of progression for, I think, very good reason. But since some time has passed, I guess this was the 5th year since the pilot at Towano, right?
Yes.
I would love to circle back and kind of see how it's going with professional development in the middle schools, how students are responding to it, just how it's working, and what the plan is in the future. And this, I guess, ties into our budget conversation later on in the meeting, because if we're going to invest one-to-one throughout high school at some point, that's going to be a cost associated with that. So I'd just like to get kind of an overall update, again, not now, but at some point, if at all possible.
Absolutely.
Are there additional questions, feedback? Thank you, Ms. Cook. I had similar thoughts about just wanting more information about one-to-one and what the long-term plan is. And then with regard to this particular refresh, so the 850 laptops that are being purchased, is that across all 4 middle schools? Or is it
Yes, it is. We have a number that are
Smattering.
dropping off at each of the schools depending on when they were originally fielded, so it will be spread across. Actually, these will be 3 of them because James Blair just got theirs, but there's kind of a mixture of a number at each school that will be receiving these.
Thank you, Mr. Landers.
Yes, ma'am.
Moving on to item 7.7, internet firewall appliance purchase.
Thank you. This next item is for your consideration for approval of purchasing a new firewall appliance for the division's internet connection. Our current firewall is approaching end of life and will not support the increasing bandwidth requirements that we're expecting over the coming years. The division did submit a solicitation in compliance with the Federal Universal Services Administrative Company E-rate regulations on January 11th, which closed on February 8th. We received 6 proposals from 3 eligible vendors, with the Palo Alto appliance submitted by CDW as the most responsive and cost-effective. The total cost of the firewall is $198,772.20.
Questions? Ellie?
I have no idea what this is. Can you give me kind of?
The firewall serves 2 purposes. Number one, it is our primary method of defense for our internal network. It basically blocks all the bad traffic from coming into our network. It also provides SIPA-required filtering of our of internet searches and content that is coming back into our division from the internet. So that's primarily what a firewall does.
What is it?
What is it?
Is it a box?
It is. It's an appliance. It's a box that we plug into a network rack, and we plug in our primary internet connection on one end and our internal LAN on the other end, and it filters all the bad stuff out.
I have every confidence that we need it.
We absolutely
If it
need
was
it. Yes,
sitting there,
sir.
I wouldn't know what it was.
Yes, we need it. I'll just like, I'm flabbergasted by the $216,000 bid that you got.
For
Same thing. The E Plus was 216,000.
and I don't believe they were the most expensive.
They were not the most expensive.
They were across the board.
So, of the 1, 2, 3, it looks like 6 bids you had. 2 were in the 70s, and then all the rest were 148,000 on up. So.
And there was one that was over 360,000. So they do come in all flavors, but we did take a hard look at each one of them, and the Palo Alto appliance will definitely serve our needs for the coming years.
And how many years?
These typically run about 5 to 7 years, depending. You're welcome. Thank you.
Next item, information discussion, is the FY20 budget. Before I toss that to Dr. Herron, Mr. Kelly and Ms. Cook, I'm going to read a statement.
As a member of the School Board of Williamsburg, James City County, I have an interest in the fiscal year 2019-2020 school budget because my wife is an employee of the WJCC schools. However, I believe I'm able to participate in the consideration of and vote on the budget fairly and in the public interest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a member of the School Board of Williamsburg, James City County, I acknowledge that I have an interest in the fiscal year 2019-2020 school budget because I'm an employee of the Williamsburg Health Foundation. However, I believe I'm able to participate in the consideration of and vote on the budget fairly and in the public interest.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Prior to the board's discussion of the budget this evening, we did want to give you an update on some of the changes that have happened since the superintendent's proposed budget at the last meeting. And Ms. Ewan's going to present just a few slides to give you and the public an overview of where we are right now.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. This evening, we will share with you information related to the state revenue estimates and some additional expenditure-related items that have changed since we presented the superintendent's proposed budget a couple of weeks ago. Based on action by the General Assembly, we anticipate $248,174 less in state revenue than what is currently in the superintendent's proposed budget. This is primarily due to a decrease in basic aid as well as the compensation supplement funds. While the 5% salary increase remained in the final budget, the additional 2% does not go into effect until September 1st, 2019. Another contributing factor to the decrease is a change to the school counselor ratios that were presented in the governor's budget. Current SOQ ratios for school counselors are 500 to 1 at elementary, 400 to 1 at middle, and 350 to 1 at high schools. In the governor's proposed budget, those ratios were proposed to change to 375 to 1 at elementary, 325 to 1 at middle, and 300 to 1 at high, with the goal to be at 250 to 1 in all schools by fiscal year 2022. What this meant for us was an additional 5 FTEs at a total cost of $375,000, which is included in the superintendent's proposed budget. However, the General Assembly's budget included the staffing standards as follows. Elementary, 455 to 1, middle, 370 to 1, and high, 325 to 1. Which means we would only need to add 1.5 counselors as opposed to 5 to meet SOQ, which is a minimum standard.
I would intervene at the moment and just add a little bit to that. In front of you this evening, you have a detailed information about counsellors within our system and how we compare to other systems, to school divisions in the region, and to our like divisions as well. When we were presenting this information before, 5 were automatic because we had to meet the SOQ standard. As the board considers this evening, I want you to be aware of other data brought to the table this evening that shows our continuing need for school counsellors, and to take this into consideration as you look at this evening. There's also some research on the impact of how student counsellor ratio impacts student success in our schools, as well as the comparisons I mentioned, and there are also some information. There is also some information about direct counselling and services and what those involve.
To summarize, our estimated revenue adjustments based on the approved General Assembly budget and projected contributions from our local funding partners is $3,747,609. Our total mandatory and essential expenditure increases that are within the superintendent's proposed budget total $6,293,511. We have also received information regarding our anticipated increase to our workers' compensation insurance premium, which amounts to $55,616. However, based on updated information from New Horizons, we can decrease the amount that is currently in the superintendent's proposed budget by $57,623. When you factor in the $1.58 million in savings from realignment, efficiencies, and attrition, we need an additional $956,573 to fully fund this budget. Currently, the amount requested in the superintendent's proposed budget, beyond the projected contributions of our local funding partners, is approximately $710,000. With these new adjustments to revenue and expenditures, this amount will need to increase by $246,167, or expenditure reductions will need to be made.
If I could add, this price includes keeping the 5 counselors originally proposed.
Up to the board. Ms. Cook?
So the amount that we're asking from the localities over and above what we believe they anticipated allocating to us for this fiscal year that we're talking about is about $1 million.
Just under $1 million.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I understood that.
The equivalent of a 1% raise for our staff.
And the General Assembly, in all of its wisdom, with the September 1st salary adjustment, we're not messing around with that, right? We're just going to do fiscal year. Okay.
No questions?
So the general, as Mrs. Cook said, the General Assembly in their infinite wisdom, when they moved so they broke the 5% up into 3 and 2?
Yes.
Okay, so this year we'll get 3, and then next year we'll get the adjustment for 2 if we stick to.
We'll get all of the funding in FY20. We have to certify that we provided an increase in FY19, and then
Okay.
increase in FY20 to total to 5.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. The first has to do with textbook expenses, and just I've gotten over the years several questions from parents about our investment in textbooks and instructional materials. And if I read the budget proposal correctly, I saw those going down. And so could you just
Yes.
help us understand and explain that, please?
Sure. The textbook line is going down approximately $73,000. Of that amount, $55,000 is a realignment of funds to the correct expenditure classification within the instructional technology budget. The funds were moved to contractual services. And then $12,000 of the reduction is related to one-time expenditures in the FY19 CTE budget for expansion of Project Lead the Way.
So we're not we're
no, ma'am.
So we're not reducing our investment in materials. Also, I have a question about the Child Nutrition Services fund balance on page 43 of the budget. That fund balance was on the decline for a while, and it seems to have rebounded somewhat. And my recollection is that rebounding aligns with our decision to start selling sodas in the high school cafeterias again. And I was curious if that was a coincidence or not.
Mr. Snipes, do you want to respond to that question, please?
Tread carefully, Mr. Tread carefully. Where's the ice cream?
So I believe the question is about the change in the budget amount.
Fund balance, yeah.
I think your question was regarding if sodas was the cause for us having a fund balance.
An increased, yeah.
No, the increased fund balance was due to the not having to purchase certain equipment this year, as well as some hires that were not made, that we had some extended non-hires.
So the fund balance increased 2 years in a row. It went from roughly $700,000 to $900,000 now to 1.1 million. And it had been previously sort of on the decline. And so we didn't so that the not hiring and the equipment was for multiple years?
According to Ms. Haley, that was the increase from last year.
Okay, I'd just like to understand that better. would like to understand our revenue better. Okay, thank you.
Additional questions regarding the budget?
Sorry, it isn't.
Go.
I've
Yeah.
got a question, but I'll wait till the
Okay.
end.
And I know that we've talked about this, Dr. Herron, and you've said you and Ms. Ewing are working on it, but I do feel that moving forward, when we adopt our request, or when we adopt our final budget, at some point, we need to be really crystal clear with our funding, local funders, on what our plans are moving forward with regard to increased compensation and overall for teachers and our investment in SPED and ELL, and we know we're going to be trying to increase our counselor numbers, our buses, instructional materials, hopefully maybe one day be able to address class size. So, are we going to be able to effectively communicate that increase, our hope to increase year over year?
Yes, I think when we present our budget on March 15th, as it is now, to the localities, we'll talk about the data that's driven this particular budget, but also we would hope to be in a position to begin to project out on our needs for future years. Certainly with compensation, there's a plan being written right now to meet our goal over 5 years to be top in the region with regard to teacher salaries, back all compensation.
We can attach a dollar figure to that and project out.
We will. I think the difficult piece in that is the plan involves being ahead of the percentage that other divisions give, which we don't know until it actually happens. So it's very difficult to project out to an exact amount, but we certainly would plan over several years to keep giving a significant increase to our teachers.
Yeah, I just would like to talk a little bit about equity. Because this budget is our biggest and most important policy document, right? It speaks to what we believe in, and your recommendation, Dr. Herron, solidly states that our priority is teacher pay, which I absolutely concur with, and I'm ready to support it as it currently stands with the counselors, even though the state kind of backed away from that and the pay piece, but. I do remain concerned about equity and how our budget aligns with that goal toward equity. And I would like to see that work accelerate in future budget years. I see that we're making progress with SPED and ELL, but it's not enough. It's not what our students need. I think that the investment in security guards as a deterrent and keeping safety as paramount. I think the assistant principals, the counselors are critical, but I don't think it's enough, and I think we need to continue to invest more. But how we allocate resources based on need still concerns me. When I look at our families that are economically disadvantaged, we do allocate resources at the elementary school via our Title I funding, and that's also not likely enough, but it's something. But at the middle and high school levels, I remain concerned about the educational needs of our economically disadvantaged students at that level. And our opportunity gaps in our school division are real, and they're reflected in the achievement gaps by test scores and among other things. And I know we're not unique to those struggles, but I think we can be unique in reducing those gaps. And I think we have the resources in the community to do that. And I think to do that, we have to take a hard look at the structural barriers and adjust accordingly, and have those adjustments reflected in our budget. And I just would like to look systematically at class size, teacher ratios, experienced teacher allocation, class offerings, other educational supports, whether it includes teacher assistance, and adjust with existing resources. Perhaps it means mentoring new teachers. I just think there are structural barriers in our school division, not unique to our school division, that negatively impact, unintentionally, but nonetheless negatively impact students' ability to learn. Just a very random example, I sometimes am concerned about fees and the role they play in creating barriers to access for our students. Comparing participation in fee-based activities against the population as a whole, are we seeing gaps there? At younger kids, we know have a higher take-up rates for free and reduced lunch, for instance. And at the elementary school, there are fewer fees, so I'm not sure it's so much of an issue at the elementary school level. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But at the high school level, at least my experience is that almost weekly, children are asked to pay for athletic fees or field trip fees or test fees. It sometimes feels like death by a thousand cuts. And if money is an issue for a family, we can inadvertently shut out families and make them feel awkward over and over again throughout a school year. And I'm not sure we're looking at that systematically, and that's just one example, because every time we do something that's fee-based, we could be disenfranchising a family or a kid or siblings. And, you know, we say very clearly if they're free and reduced lunch, they don't have to pay. But that's something that they have to do over and over again to be able to access. So anyway, I think that we can do better locally, and I'd like to see us try to accelerate that effort. And, you know, hopefully the state one day will wake up and help us, because the localities are carrying most of this burden. And, but anyway, as I said, I'm ready to support this budget as is, but I felt like I needed to talk about equity.
Thank you, Ms. Cook.
Yeah, I
Beers?
don't have a prepared statement, but I have questions. I'm not quite sure I understand the use of the term structural barriers, and a lot of the things that you've identified clearly have budget implications, and we've parsed this budget pretty well. And while I don't disagree with some of the things that you've said, I have a problem where I guess I don't quite understand what you mean by structural barriers. Are we talking about because students can't afford the AP test, or is it and what does that have to do with the budget? Are we supposed to increase the budget to deal with those structural barriers, and what are they?
So it's not our job to determine that. I think it's
What is a structural barrier? I just wanted an answer to that, what you think it is.
What do I think it is? Well,
Yeah.
I think I just outlined one. One thing is fee-based participation. That is a structural system that can impact a student's ability to participate
So
in school.
what's the solution to that? Pave the fee? See, I'm just, you know, it's like setting up a whole series of things that cost money.
Right.
And are we expected to pay for all of those things, or do it incrementally? Or I'm just, you know, I've looked really carefully at this budget, and I don't see a lot of wiggle room. I mean, I can fully appreciate the notion that, well, we need to keep looking at that as we go into the future. But we also need more money as we go into the future. And so I just, I suppose I'm going to support this budget. I don't totally agree with your analysis. I guess that's what you say.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. I think, just to Ms. Cook's point, she was giving information, and as I think one of the things we want to do with regard to transparency with our funding partners is to let them know that
I'm
this.
sorry, are you explaining what she said?
I'm trying to
Mrs.
support
Cook,
that.
can't you explain? You can do your own explanation, can't you?
Can I give my,
Your interpretation of her answer?
yes, I would like to
Okay,
interpret that,
all right.
and then I'll pass it back to Ms. Cook. So I think the point was to ensure that our funding partners realize that this isn't a one stop here. We need to continue.
Okay. You don't think our funding, I always sort of choke on the funding partner notion, but I've spoken to just about all of the members of the Board of Supervisors. They are fully aware of the fact that we are going into the future and it is going to cost more money. They know this isn't a one-time thing. So I guess I'm puzzled by that myself, but that's, you know, I do take some time to talk to at least the people in the county. I don't talk very much with the people in the city because they're only responsible for 10% of our budget. Ones who are really have to be addressed and have to be dealt with are our Board of Supervisors.
And I appreciate you talking to them, and I think most of us do talk to our counterparts on the Board of Supervisors and the City Council, and I think just talking in terms of equity and making sure that everyone, the listening public, board members, funding partners have an understanding that there are equity issues, and we can do better. So there's an this is a budget that I think many of us do support. I was going to cycle back around with regard to counselors. I think in the proposed budget, we continue to keep 5, even though the state has, again, stepped away. Did want to kind of do a straw point poll to see what board members think. The superintendent is proposing that we continue to keep it in there. But I think just having this conversation was my thoughts with regard to Ms. Cook. Just an ongoing conversation of, this is just the beginning. There are so many more things that we can and should address. And you're right, they do take money.
And those are the things that you mentioned are included in the budget, and I fully support the fact that we're going to have more guidance counselors. And I'd like to have more than that. And I'd like to have a situation where students didn't have to pay for anything, that the schools itself could be funded entirely so that they wouldn't have to, but that's never going to happen. So I'm not going to put the Board of Supervisors in a situation where we're going to stand by, we need this and we need that, and I don't think we're going that way. And I'm pleased to see that. I think the relationship that we have our funding partners is really good. It's excellent.
It is.
But I also think, I don't just talk to my counterpart, I don't just talk to my John McLennan. I think it's important to talk to all the members. Now, the only people who apparently get to talk to board members on a regular basis are those who are on the liaison committee. How often does that meet? Once every?
We're meeting for the
Once
most
a
part,
month?
for the most part
Once every
monthly.
other month?
For the most part monthly.
Monthly?
Liaison? That's
Now, I'm curious, are those public?
4 times a year.
Are those public meetings? They're public meetings, aren't they?
Yes, they're
Sure they
posted.
are.
Yes.
Okay, so the public could go also as well and see what kind of discussions we're having with the board.
So I heard that, yes, you support 5 counselors to keep,
I support our budget. Totally.
even though the state has backed down. So can I get a straw poll on keeping that in there, keeping 5 counselors in there? And then Ms. Young had some comments, and I'll circle back to Ms. Cook.
One of the things I have a question about, having been a teacher, and I know about field trips, and I know about supporting students who cannot pay. And fortunately or unfortunately, as a teacher, I paid for many field trips myself for kids, and I assume probably that is also happening, but many PTAs also assume the burden of doing that. And I think for some of these, for things like field trips and some of the other things that were mentioned, that could be brought up to the PTAs, because our budget's never going to be able to cover everything. And if there was any one thing other than the counselors and that I would really like us to take about, which you did speak about, was class size. Because we know that class size impacts learning. If you have a student, and having been that student who would have never asked a question ever, a teacher being able to even notice that, especially if they have a student who is reticent to ask a question, you need smaller class size. You cannot continue to. But see, the minute you start talking about class size, you're all talking about classrooms. Then you're talking about space. That's not a single issue when you start talking about class size. But I guess for me, I do want to support the budget. I do support keeping our 5 counselors. And then I would like to some of those things that were termed as structural barriers, I'd like to see how they're now being handled in the schools. Because we'll never be able to cover everything that we could or would like to cover. And there's many things that I do not think is wrong for families to struggle with. I really, having come from a poor family myself, my parents, I saved my babysitting money, and I don't know if those opportunities even exist anymore, but I saved money, and that is part of becoming a resilient, responsible human being, is sometimes when you have to struggle for those things that you desire as a kid, and especially in high school. So I guess I would just like to know, first of all, are PTAs being engaged in helping families that can't provide monies for those opportunities? And anyway, but I want to thank Ms. Cook for bringing up some of those things. But I think in the future, we're going to face, we're facing challenges now, we're going to face many, many more.
Young.
So, since we're talking, yes, I support the budget as it stands. I support the 5 counselors that we have in the budget. I think when we talk about equity, I think we're talking about the basic way that we fund schools on a per capita basis. So, we are funding our schools right now based on how many kids are in the school, and then you're looking at the kids that are in the school and then the need of the kids in the schools. And sometimes the needs of certain schools are vastly different than the needs of some other schools. When you look at some of the big point difference that we have in free and reduced lunch from some schools to other schools. So when you talk about PTAs being able to help subsidize some of the fees, you're talking about the schools that have a higher percentage of free and reduced lunches. Also, those PTA budgets are much lower than the schools that have 17% free and reduced lunch. Those PTAs are flush with money compared to the ones that have 59% free and reduced lunch. It's just, so some of that becomes difficult as well. So then I think moving forward, and this is not talking about this fiscal year, it's not talking about this budget year, but just in the future, I think we need to have a discussion about how we look at school funding in general. And if we have schools that are not kind of, if we can't through redistricting have balanced schools, then how do we make adjustments for the imbalance of need within our schools? And we can do that by looking at the per capita, by looking at maybe changing some of the class sizes, by looking at some of the suggestions that were given tonight by some of our speakers about, giving stipends for mentoring, there's just ways that we can address this, but it doesn't pertain to this budget before us right now. So the budget that's before us right now, I support.
Very well said. Ms. Taylor?
I wanted to say I support the budget as well, in particular keeping in the 5 school counselors because they have such a significant impact on school climate and the students and their success. So I think that is a good focus for us moving forward.
Ms. Young?
No, I mean, okay. First of all, tonight we had several speakers from the village, and they are doing an outstanding job providing mentoring in several of our schools. They provide tutors. We have other organizations that provide them. But I guess I just want to give a shout out to those volunteers, because when I went with Ms. Hummel and we were over at Laurel Lane, they have a large community of volunteers that participate in that school and helping students. And again, to the village especially for stepping up. I believe they're still doing a lot of mentoring at James River. Is that correct? And I appreciate that. I just want to say that we have been very fortunate in this community, and a lot of it has to do because we do have so many people that are retired and use their time to help our kids. We're blessed in that way.
Any additional questions on the budget?
I just have comment on what Ms. Hummel said. We have made statements like that, the ones you made about the budget and where we are, almost every year that I can think of for the last 4 or 5 years. So at some point, we either put up or shut up in terms of that distribution. The other thing is, when you start to move resources around, you have to pull them, I'm sorry, you're going to get, I know, I'm
I'll go like this.
no, oh, that's much better. You're going to have to pull them from other places, and probably from other schools. And the teachers and parents in those schools are not going to be particularly happy about that. So it's, and that's probably one of the reasons it has taken, and it probably will continue to take as long as it has to rectify. And I would say to rectify decisions that prior board members made about the distribution of our students over 10 years ago. And we're still dealing with the consequences of that. So I couldn't agree with you more. But it really, and there are a number of ways of dealing with inequity, but certainly the distribution of our students, the redistricting of our students is good for the students, it's good for the teachers. I'd like to say it's good for the parents, but I know all parents are going to agree with that. But it's the reality, it's the world we live in. And so I don't know, so what do we do? Make that the number one priority next year? And say, let's really tackle that for real? Okay.
So to your point, Dr. Beers, a question that I have about the budget is, last year, I think in response to board members talking about equity, there was monies set aside for schools who had significant equity issues or needs to use. And so I just wanted to know where in this proposed budget where are those dollars, and how and what is the amount that's allocated? I think it was $172,000 that was allocated last year.
Yeah, basically the equity line last year did reduce very slightly the per student cost at the middle and high school. And as that fairly small amount of money, about over $150,000, was put into a line item, and we actually looked at the data by school, middle and high schools, and the data and the gaps were most obvious in math, particularly in Berkeley Middle School and Lafayette High School, and then James Blair came online and was part of that as well. And so we employed a math coach with that money who's working specifically with math with students who need it in those schools, literally following the data. And then there were several other programmatic requests that schools had that were fulfilled with those funds as well. This year there is still a line item in the budget, again, replenished by moving funds around. We've done everything to realign resources to put them under goals 1 and 2 especially. Under the equity line, there's another $150,000 this year, and it's actually in the assistant superintendents for high schools budget. So you'll see that budget has gone up a little bit. And again, we're going to be looking at the data and following the data and seeing where the biggest need is. When we talk about equity and special education teachers and teachers of English learners, those extra staff are not counted in the staffing allocation per school, which is based on student enrollment. Those are extra staff on top of that are put in the school where those needs are. So we're addressing some of these issues through extra staffing already, and we're adding to that every year that we create a budget. Only 2 English language teachers this year, but we've got 3 more special ed teachers. So each year we build, and then we put those where they're needed, not based on a per student allocation, but where they're most needed per the students. So I think as time goes on, we're addressing some of those issues through extra staffing and extra resources being brought to the school. And yes, can we do more? I think one of our main goals in our strategic plan comes under the title of equity. That was on purpose. It was a response to the community and the desire to make sure that every student has an opportunity to succeed in our system. And I think that goal, along with goal 1, with our opportunity gaps, will inform a lot of our decision-making in the years to come.
Dr. Herron?
I think it is true. We have earmarked additional resources in the schools that we're talking about, and that's a really important step. The step that I'm talking about, and I appreciate everything else that's going on, that we're doing, is I think it's really important to reduce the number of free and reduced lunch kids in one high school so that there's a more equitable distribution of students across our high schools. And I know that's a tough one. And I think that's, for me, I think that's a really important consideration, and it may lead to me being only a one-term school board member, but I think it's really important that all the students share. All the schools, all the high schools share in that. That's, that will be a discussion for. But I do not want to leave the impression that I don't recognize those additional resources, because I looked at the budget. I know that we're spending some more money, we're putting more resources into Lafayette, for example. I think that's a good step, and we haven't heard any complaints about that.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Thank you again, Dr. Herron and Renee and all staff for pulling together the budget and working so hard to give us information and keeping us up to date as we learn more from Richmond. And I support the budget. I think consensus is everyone on the board supports the budget as presented. And so with that, are folks comfortable voting on the budget at the next meeting, March 19th meeting? Okay, all right. Moving on to policies. Item 9.1, retire policy CHC, System of Communication.
What is this one? Gotta get back. Is Val? Or is there anything?
Communication.
It's just, we're retiring this.
Oh, sorry, did I say revise? Retire.
Yeah.
So,
Does anyone have any questions about it?
okay.
No, it's coming.
Yeah.
It's up there. It just took me a while.
All right, it'll roll over to the consent. Item 9.2, revised policy BDDH/KD, public participation at school board meetings.
What I said about the SOP, let's put it here. So the wording in the SOP is much better than the wording that's in this, when you start at line 15,
Wonky.
Oh, wait, can they open
Open the door.
Open the door.
So
I think it's just that it was trying to match VHSB.
I'd rather match the SOP because that's understandable.
SBA, yeah.
Rather, and understand, match the SOP because that's much better language than that paragraph, the third paragraph here.
Janet, are you tracking that?
Is that something that we can, are folks okay with that, and we can make the change and still move forward with it?
Okay with that?
I'm not sure I understand what we're doing.
So if you look at line 15.
But I am.
So it's just written kind of awkward. So if you flip back to the SOP on
Right.
page 29, if you just look at that language,
Yeah.
So I think to
replace
Mrs. Young's point that we replace the language and bring it back for discussion at the next, and we put it on as an action item.
And not in the consent.
Not a consent agenda, so we can discuss it to make sure that we all
Yep.
understand the wording.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Right, good with that? Item 9.3, revised policy GCPC, retirement of full-time staff members.
So that was just line 24, because line 24 had payment from the retiree is due by the 15th of each month. Failure to pay will result in coverage. And the failure to pay and the resulting in coverage is something that happens not by the school system, but by the insurance policy. So
They
it
pay
is.
directly.
Huh?
Yes.
So it is not anything that we have to put in there in our policy. Because it's something that the insurance will notify them. Is that correct, Mr. Baker? Okay. Anyone have any questions about that?
Is this standard, the 25% and $25 a day? Is that typical of what districts do? Sort of looks like it, but I'm just curious.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Yeah, your question about do other school divisions do this? We reached out, there was a VEA survey across the entire Commonwealth about this issue, and most divisions do allow their employees to stay on their health insurance, and about, I think about 60% do provide some kind of subsidy, and some do significantly more, like.
And the sick leave payout, is that pretty typical too as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all. Yeah, that's all I wanted to know.
And just for anyone who might be interested, how many people are we talking about?
For us, we currently have 27 retirees who are taking advantage of this opportunity to get $750 a year.
Or to the consent agenda. Action item, personnel actions. Is there a motion to approve the personnel actions?
I move we approve personnel actions as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
And that's the agenda that was presented in closed session, not what's on although it's an executive content here, so I get it, right?
Yeah, as presented in closed session.
Hearing no additional discussion. Ms. Souza.
Mrs. Young,
Aye.
Dr. Beers,
Aye.
Ms. Cook,
Aye.
Ms. Hummel,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Mrs. Taylor. Aye. Ms. Ownby.
Aye. Okay, moving on to item 11, board member comments. Start with Ms. Taylor.
Sure. Last week, I had the pleasure of touring Lafayette with Miss Young, and Dr. Holloman was a gracious host, and I enjoyed learning about all the wonderful things going on in the RAM community. And also a quick thank you to Dr. Heron and her staff for all their hard work this budget season, as well as my colleagues. It's never an easy time, but I think that Dr. Heron has presented a budget of need for us, and I fully support the budget moving forward. And
Thank
that's
you.
all I have this evening. Thank you.
Ms. Cook.
I'd like to thank Dr. Heron for her kindness update, and I look forward to those in the future. It's important now, I think, more than ever. And then actually I had 2 questions about speakers tonight. The first has to do with one speaker mentioned counselor response time, and I would just like to learn more about what that is, what that expectation is. What the standard is, just what the expectation is. And then also, one speaker spoke about 8th graders participating in JV sports. And that's a question that I get often in the community and am not as able to answer as I'd like to be. So if I could just get some information so that I can respond appropriately when asked, I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Ms. Young?
I'd like to ditto what Ms. Cook said about 8th graders in junior varsity sports. That would be, my knowledge is limited, so I would appreciate more information on that. I had a wonderful opportunity of going to Lafayette with Mrs. Taylor. It was my first real look at the new gym, which is gorgeous, and The contractors did an amazing job. I was very, very pleased with the way it turned out, and not that I had anything to do with that, other than the fact that it's pretty amazing, and I'm looking forward to War Hill enjoying that same success. Also had an opportunity with Dr. Beers to go to Stonehouse. We had a wonderful meeting with the principal, Melissa White, and as circumstances turned out, we just had a real opportunity to spend time with her and really talk to her, and was delightful. I just enjoyed that so much. I do want to thank Dr. Herron and her staff for all the effort and presentations on the budget, and I do fully support the budget and do believe it is a budget of need. And I guess my only other comment is I agree with Dr. Beers on every year we talk about need and equity, and I would like us to really take a hard look at what we can do, really address that continuing issue, because I think we have been hearing about it a lot. So I would like to actually have this board spend a lot of time on that, so thank you.
Dr. Beers?
Yes. I also would like to thank Superintendent and her staff in the creation, and I know the many, many hours in the creation of this budget. I fully support this budget, and I think it is a budget of need. I'd also like to thank once again the WJCC School Foundation and Clarence Wilson. I know he's gone now, but I won't say I was skeptical at the very beginning, but I had questions and maybe a concern or two that have all evaporated.
Skeptical.
And I think the work that they have done has been phenomenal and has really helped to raise the morale of our teachers. So kudos to them. I also I enjoyed meeting with Melissa White, the principal at Stonehouse. I was also there for the Read Across America, which I try to make just about every year since I think that that school opened. But the other thing I think was really quite moving was she received a proclamation put together by the General Assembly that was presented by Delegate Pog.
Pogie.
What?
Pogie.
Pogie. Oh, sorry. Is it Pogie?
Ogie.
All right. It's not the way it's spelled, but that's okay. Yeah, okay. Pogie, for recognizing the accomplishments that Stonehouse has done in becoming a blue ribbon school. It was really something. And then a Read Across America. I actually, and many of us who are out there, read. I happened to read in Tina Pitt's third grade classroom, and lo and behold, to my surprise, she knew who I was, and I did not recognize her immediately. She was a teacher down at Dunbar-Irwin many, many years ago, which is way downtown. It's a downtown Newport News school. When a colleague of mine from the University of Virginia helped put together a pilot language arts program. So it was kind of fun to see her again and talk a little bit about that. The only other thing I would say, actually just two more things. The Educational Advisor Committee of HARETA is meeting March 20th, and I'll be attending that. And the only other thing I would say is I would urge teachers, I went to my first textbook adoption committee meeting dealing with Algebra 1, and I would urge teachers in all the schools where textbooks are up for adoption or selection to take the time to review and evaluate those materials and hand them back in. I think it's I know it's a little tedious, but it's time well spent because you are the ones who actually will be using them. And comments are good.
Dr. Beers, Mr. Kelly?
I just wanted to thank the Stonehouse Counselor for coming tonight and her obvious demonstration of her enthusiasm and her desire to meet the needs of her students. So I appreciated her coming as a speaker tonight, and I would certainly support the 5 new guidance counselors and wish there was more. Having been on this school board for a while, it's nice to be in a situation where I'm figuring out what I'm going to add to the budget versus what we're going to take away. For many years, we were what we're going to cut, what we're going to cut, what we're going to cut. I don't say it creates ulcers, but it creates a lot of sleepless nights. So now being in the position where we're trying to figure out what we can add, we will never be in a position where we have enough, where we say we're good, because we're always going to keep raising the bar, and we're always going to keep wanting more. And we had several speakers tonight where you got to add these things that we want to add, and we all want to add those things, but there are constraints there. So it's as it is, we're already asking our funding partners for $1 million more than what they've kind of told us that they can sign up for. So that's just the way it is, and the way it probably will always be, because we will never have enough money to do everything that we want to do for every kid. And it's just that's the struggle and the tough decisions that you have to make. And I do appreciate Dr. Herron kind of explaining some of the ways that we do manage our resources that may not be quite as obvious to how those come out in the budget, as far as putting additional teachers in buildings that might not be as obvious as we're thinking. So, thank you.
Mr. Kelly, Ms. Hummel?
I also want to thank Clarence Wilson and the WJCC Foundation for coming out. And even though, the amount of money is not on par with our budget that we're discussing tonight, every little bit helps, and every little bit contributes to enhancing our division. So I want to thank the WJCC Foundation once again. I want to thank our funding partners for hopefully realizing that although we have an almost $1 million gap, it is a budget of need. It's a good budget that will definitely move us forward and keep our community competitive as we have been in attracting good teachers and being the kind of community where people want to move here and stay here because of our schools. So I want to thank them for that. I want to also talk about kindness and talk about how all of us should practice kindness all the time, because we never know what individual struggles someone else can be going through, and we should be kind to our children, our students, our coworkers, our fellow board members, our central staff. We just should practice kindness all the time. So just want to say thank you for having that be one of the focuses in your school system. And then I want to compliment you and everyone on the budget moving forward. We are making great progress. As the speakers came here tonight, it is nice to be able to say we're looking at more counselors, we're looking at more ESL teachers and more special ed teachers, and we're really trying to put our resources where they need to be, helping the children that need it the best. So, that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Ditto to each of my board colleagues. Did want to speak to some of the speakers that came tonight. One of the speakers from the village spoke about recruiting teachers and staff of color, and I think that's something that this division is eager to do, and this board has talked about, and I know Mr. Baker has provided us updates on that. I know this administration does have a recruitment and retention plan, and that we received a report a couple years ago, but maybe that's something that we could have an update on, additional efforts. And we all know the importance of having teachers who look like the students that they're teaching. And I just want to make it clear that everyone on this board believes wholeheartedly in that, and I know that our staff are working hard to bring that to fruition, but maybe just an update on that. And I too often get the question about eighth grade athletics, and so having that information so we can share that with constituents would be great. And then with regard to the budget, I think that it is phenomenal that the board recognizes that when the state steps away from a good idea, something like counselors, we feel like we need to continue to do that, and so we will support that, even though the state is not able to support us financially the way they had originally said that they would do. And while we often talk about equity, I know I've been in this division as a parent for, wow, a long time, over 20 years. And so I don't recall always having those equity conversations. I watched school board meetings for a long, long time. And so while in recent years we do often talk about that, I'm not so sure that's something that we always did as a body. And so I think that it's important to have those conversations. It's important to have that as a distinct strategy in our strategic plan. And so I think as often as we can bring that to the table and talk about ways to begin to mitigate that is worthwhile. I too was able to attend the Read Across America Day at Stonehouse, which is always fun. I always look forward to reading to a classroom, and I told Melissa White that was like the Mac Daddy. Like everyone celebrates Read Across America, but Stonehouse, it's like the Mac Daddy celebration. So that's always fun. And had an opportunity to attend a band, 7th and 8th grade band pre-assessment concert, which is the first time, and my children have been in band for a long time, again, like going on 10 years. And this is the first time that 2 middle schools partnered together. So Blair and Berkeley partnered together to kind of put on a show so they could practice their performance for their assessment at the regional level. And so they did that a few weeks ago, and it was held at Lafayette High School. And so that was fun to see that and have them have an opportunity to do it live, and they actually had judges come in too and give them feedback so that when they do the real thing in a few weeks, they'll be prepared for that. So moving on to meeting schedule and upcoming events. Policy Committee is meeting on March 13th at 8 o'clock here in the annex. Also on the 13th, the 21st Century and Career Ready Advisory Committee is meeting here at 3:30. Special Education Advisory Committee is meeting at the Rec Center on the 14th at 6:30 in the evening. And then upcoming meetings, the joint meeting that we spoke about where we will present our budget to our funding partners will take place on March 15th here in room 300 at 9 o'clock. We will have a closed session at 6 p.m. on March 19th at Stryker, followed by a work session at 6:30 in City Council chambers. We'll have a closed session on April 9th here in the annex at 6 p.m., followed by a work session on the 9th at 6:30. So agenda items for the next meeting, I believe we'll have an equity series.
That's
update.
correct.
And then we'll also talk, are we going to do like a portrait of a graduate?
Yeah, basically the equity series is going to talk about career awareness and profile of a graduate, among other things, and just give the board an update on that whole piece of the puzzle that we've been working on for a while. So Dr. Worley will be leading that at the next meeting.
Thank you. So with that, I always do. This meeting is adjourned.
Perfect.